Hi, and welcome to this podcast from Tomorrow Today. One of our main frameworks is the framework of TIDES, where what we've done is we've looked at the main drivers and disruptors of change and grouped them together under the acronym TIDES, where T is for technology, I is for institutional change, your D, demographics, E, environmental and ethics, and finally the changes that we are having driving um, through our society as a result of shifts in social values. Now, what the concept of tides gives us is a great image to move on and to take it the next step further. We've worked with a lot of organizations over the last number of years around the world where we've exposed our clients to the concept of tides, where we've done work tracking changes, and in the presentation dealing with the tides of change, we've then exposed our clients to those changes and discussed the implications for their organizations. But if it just stays there, then the knowledge and the information is effectively useless. So what I'm going to be doing through this introductory podcast and then in two following ones is looking at the concept of surfing the tides of change. So if we have these tides of change coming through and influencing our world in the present and ultimately in the future, what are we going to do? Are we going to stand back and be victims and just be overwhelmed by these tides in much the same way as we see in communities that have been affected by tsunamis and tsunami disasters? Or are we going to actually embrace the tides, embrace those changes, and position ourselves so that we can take best advantage of those changes that are happening, both in the world at large, but also more close at hand in the world that totally influences us and our organizations? And if you think about it, we have a group of people around the world who are really effective at harnessing the power of tides, and that's surfers. So we're going to be using the concept and the image of surfing and looking at saying, how can we use this analogy and this metaphor and bring it through into the corporate world and the corporate environment and our process of engaging with tides so that we're more effectively positioned to take advantage of them in the future. So we're going to be looking at two main focus areas in the next two podcasts. The one podcast will be looking at the external influences. So what is it externally that makes a good surfing experience and that makes for effective surfing? And then the second one we're going to look at, or the final one, is we're going to look at the internal factors that make surfing a pleasant and in effect a great experience. The external factors, we're going to be looking at things like wind, we'll be looking at the swell, understanding the influence of the ocean floor. Where does swell come from? What causes swell to happen? And then we'll be taking all of these surfing concepts and surfing experiences and tying them back into our experience in the corporate world and looking at what the metaphor can teach us about being effective in engaging with the tides of change so that we can move forward and be different, or be more effective rather. And then the final one, looking at the internal factors, looking at things like fitness, looking at courage, looking at knowing your limits. And again, in the same way as we did with the previous podcast, where we looked at the external factors and said, what does that metaphor, the analogy, teach us that we can use to be more effective in the future? We'll do the same then, looking at these internal factors. How can we as leaders, how can we as directors, how can we as people within organizations look at ourselves and position ourselves and understand ourselves better so that we can take advantage of the tides of change moving forward? So that'll be the process over the next 2 weeks. These podcasts will be uploaded on Fridays, and you'll be notified through the Tomorrow Today app, and you'll be able to go and fetch them. My name's Raymond de Villiers, and you can contact me on Raymond at tomorrowtoday.co.za if you have any questions, or if you'd like to comment or set up a meeting to discuss this with me a little bit further. or with any one of my colleagues from Tomorrow Today, and we'd be happy to come along and to help you and to engage with your organization so that you can take your exposure to those excuse me, you can take your exposure to those 5 drivers of change and your understanding of those 5 drivers of change and move it the next step on to say, so how do we take advantage and harness them to be more effective in our future.